Sorry, little data companies into the area. The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building, there was just a huge explosion. Tower 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse surrounding the entire area. There's been a major collapse in the tower. The command center out here, everybody has... There was a major collapse. The World Trade Center's collapsed. Building 2 has collapsed. The other towers have collapsed. Ready to collapse. Ready to collapse.
Well, had the building collapsed at 10:45, it would have been shrouded in all of the debris and clouds of the North Tower. We wouldn't know anything about it. We might not even assume how it came down. We wouldn't have seen it on video. It's a 47-story skyscraper, easily the tallest building in 33 of our states. A football field away from the Twin Towers. It collapsed mysteriously on the afternoon of 9/11 at about 5:20. Most people don't know about it. It wasn't hit by an airplane. It had 8 to 10 fairly small fires and a lot of smoke. Concentrated, curiously enough, on the 12th and 13th floor, that which is occupied by the Securities and Exchange Commission, which lost thousands of files related to hundreds of cases it was actively pursuing against Wall Street companies like Enron. And it's on the opposite side of the building from the Twin Towers that collapsed. So how did that fire get so strong all around the 12th floor? Well, here's Building 7 coming down second by second. You can see the gaining downward momentum. You can put it on a plot of drop distance versus time. It fits the graph perfectly in the first 2.5 seconds, indicating the structure had to have been removed before the next floor came down. Meaning, the building can't fall at free fall speed and do any other work because all of its gravitational potential has been converted into kinetic energy. It can't crush 40,000 tons of steel on its way down without slowing down. It did not slow down. It dropped as fast as a rock dropped off the top of the building.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
This happened on 9/11. If this came down by explosive controlled demolition, it puts everything into question relative to the collapses of the other two buildings on 9/11. It's part of the same problem. But let's take a quick look at the Twin Towers because the evidence is even far greater. And incredible amounts of pyroclastic-like dust from the pulverized concrete developing even before the gravitational potential has a chance to develop. This is very telling. We have squibs or explosions coming out, but you can see the explosions racing down 30 stories ahead of the supposed kind of pancaking collapse all the way down. Very violent explosions traveling at free fall speed. The debris goes 12 to 1,400 feet, lateral ejection. This is an organic asymmetrical damage to the building from the planes and the fires, and yet we have complete symmetrical displacement of debris filling ground zero. We don't have a explosive demolition starting at the base of the building, but at the point of jet plane impacts, because we want to blame the collapse on the jet planes. So that's where we start the explosiveness. And it is very explosive, as you can see in the photo already. Everything's blowing outside the footprint. It's not an implosion. It's a very different, very explosive event. What we do is we formulate a question. We're going to make a hypothesis from this question after observations are made. We test that hypothesis with experiments. One hypothesis, I think the buildings were brought down by explosives, or I think it's brought down by fire. So we test this with experiments, analyze results, draw conclusions. The hypothesis is either corroborated or it's not. If it's not, we think, try again, get a new hypothesis going. Fires, for instance, destroy buildings very differently than controlled demolitions. They tend to creep from place to place in a building, burning out an area every 20 minutes or so, moving on looking for fresh new fuel sources. So when a building does come down by fire, And you'll note that never in history has a steel frame high-rise ever come down by fire, even though we have 100 examples, many of which are very hot, longer lasting, and much larger than the fires in the 3 buildings we're going to be looking at today. But say a wood frame building, for instance, if it does collapse, it'll fall asymmetrically. It'll fall over, not go down through the path of greatest resistance, but it'll be a natural organic process with slow, gradual deformations. That's what we look for and see in fires. Why is that a problem? Because the fires are only 1,400 degrees and steel doesn't begin to melt until 3,000 degrees. We're missing 1,000 degrees of heat energy in the official story. What could have created all of that heat, all of that molten metal? We're going to be looking at thermite as a suspect, which creates temperatures of 4,500 degrees and whose byproduct is not molten steel, but molten iron. These buildings fell over in earthquakes. Their structural systems tend to hang together. You see what was a building down at the bottom. It doesn't decompose or dismember into its individual structural elements. The concrete is not pulverized to dust. Remember, buildings that collapse don't disintegrate into their core elements. Watch as you see this amazing quantity of heat propelling it in this cauliflower-like formation, typical of a volcano almost. You and I have a problem because the implications of this are staggering. If these buildings were brought down by explosive controlled demolition, then how, who, why, how'd they get away with it? How do you get instant acceleration of 55 miles an hour laterally in order to get 600 feet away? You need some other kind of energy other than a gravitational collapse. So this is a feat that only a handful of companies in the US can accomplish. Extremely high tech, only put out by Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore Labs very recently. It's not made in a cave in Afghanistan. We're not talking about the same set of individuals anymore. This is extremely high-tech stuff put out by defense contractors. There's not 50 floors found at the bottom of the Twin Towers. There's not 10. There's not even 1 floor. Wouldn't we expect out of 110 floors to find a few at the bottom? This is really quite disturbing. When a pancaking collapse or a column failure theory collapse, either one, we're looking for a series of floors. And the building's tearing itself apart. It's accelerating down through the steel, not decelerating at all. How do we bring a structure down smoothly, symmetrically? We have to take out the core columns on a given floor within about 1/10 of a second of each other. Any deviation in that, the building will begin to tip. And as it tilts, it has angular momentum. We would expect that section to end up on the ground below. And does it? No, it disappears in this cloud of dust, and there's no mangled heap of building on the ground below. It has been dismembered completely. And what's going on? We have 22 degrees here. How can a building that's 22 degrees off center drive the rest of the building down at almost free fall speed? Well, it turns out there's an elevator modernization going on the 9 months prior to 9/11. There were workers during those 9 months. They had perfect access to the core structure, and there were plenty of reports of white powder, the protective layer around the elevator hoistways to place the explosives on the core columns and beams. The evidence will assist us in the disbelief process, because the disbelief carries us to, well, they couldn't have gotten away with it. Our government wouldn't have done this to us. Well, we're not saying your government did this to us. We're asking for a new investigation based on the scientific evidence so that we can find out the real facts, so that we can determine who may be responsible and how we bring them to justice. After all, we've lost 1 million lives in Afghanistan and Iraq, which is based on this evidence. If we sit on our butts, nothing will happen, and we'll get what we deserve. What is that? Probably another 9/11 is being planned in order to further consolidate the controls that happened as a result of 9/11, such as the Patriot Act. The invasion plans for Afghanistan were signed by President Bush on September 10th, the day before 9/11, as documented by Newsweek. And we have the Military Commissions Act, the Homegrown Terrorism Act, all of which are designed to destroy our freedoms, and in the name of what? Safeguarding us from terrorists? Who are the terrorists? We've got some serious questions we're asking here.